Welcome to Round Hill Radio, the podcast from Round Hill Community Church. Through our conversations, we discover the holy and the ordinary, find moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we're talking about when we talk about faith. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Leslie.
How are you today?
I'm well. Nice crisp air out there. And how about yourself?
It's sweater weather. Yeah.
Bring it on.
I'm thrilled. I have a turtleneck on. I'm living my best life, as they say.
The little things, whatever we can do.
Yes.
Help things along.
That was a very good segue.
Perfect.
Into our conversation this morning. So this morning's episode was my idea because when I think about what we should record about and talk about, I get a little selfish. And I'm like, what do I need a little
Nothing selfish about
assistance with? We'll just call it that. So I was thinking about this idea of finding ease. And I realized where I got that from is from my favorite yoga instructor on YouTube, Adrian.
Oh, yeah.
And Adrian had a whole series about if you're doing sort of difficult things, difficult in this instance, yoga practices, finding ease in each posture. So finding the ease in it, which is also part of this idea of not making it harder on yourself by holding extra tension.
I'd be likely to do that.
Yeah, same. So it occurred to me that could be an interesting kicking off point for a conversation, because I feel like we're all kind of settling into the fall a little bit. Things aren't as open and further along in terms of the pandemic as some of us had hoped it would be. I think maybe there's some weariness, maybe there's a little fatigue, maybe there's like the beginning of what looks like a burnout situation. But like when things sort of feel difficult, how can we find ease in them? Not that it makes it easier, but it makes our experience of a difficult time or just a weary time. How can we find an ease through it? Is kind of my question for today.
Well, it's quite a question to be asking in a global pandemic, right?
Right, yeah.
Right, because ease is not the word that I would have associated with this time at all.
I'm an optimist, Ed. I'm an optimist.
You're more than an optimist, right? So I think it's a question that's really worthy of a lot of consideration, though, because so many people are struggling for so many different reasons.
Right.
And yet we know that if we are always living right at that edge, we have to find ways of making, well, I loved your example of Adrian, of saying there has to be a way of finding some ease in the midst of that situation,
right?
Which can seem very difficult, if not impossible,
sure,
depending on your situation,
right?
And also how can we make it possible to bring a sense of ease into other people's lives? That's another big part of this. So how do we experience it and how do we share it?
Yeah, because I feel like I hear a lot about stress management, and to me that feels difficult because that makes me feel like we're trying, because I can't, if there's stress, I can't really remove the source of the stress, but I can alter my response to it. And that feels like a more accurate,
right.
Stress management just feels like go on vacation.
Yeah. And I think some people would hear stress management as, oh, great, I get to manage something else now.
Yeah.
Yes. Life is tough enough. Now I have to manage my stress somehow.
Right.
So, the word that comes to mind when I think of ease in the spiritual, in a spiritual context, is the word grace.
Okay.
Because that's something that cannot necessarily be created nor managed, right? It sort of happens on its own. And yet we can put ourselves in a position to receive it. Going back to the yoga situation, right? If you're in this difficult position or pose or anything that happens athletically, there can be a way through our breathing and our patience to find a little bit of experience of ease through that. It doesn't diminish the difficulty,
right?
But it makes it more possible to move through it in a less damaging way. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I've been thinking about this idea of when we have something difficult or we just have something that's a challenge in our lives. I keep having this sort of comment in my head of the only way is through, right? So then how can we positively impact how we go through whatever it is. You know, we're speaking sort of vaguely, but I think, you know, so many of us have different periods and different experiences, and very few things are permanent. You know, the high times change and low times change, but getting through it in a way that, you know, and I want to also be specific about saying, I'm not saying we want to make it look easy. I think that's a whole other different conversation,
right? Yeah.
About appearances and appearing, oh, it's so natural and easy, versus finding a way that is, you know, tenable and you can find your way through something.
Yeah.
Is kind of where I'm sort of sussing things out today.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I mentioned to you when we were just talking about this topic that some of the most memorable words of Jesus that come to mind are, you know, he says, "Come unto me, all you that are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest," right? And for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And I think the wisdom I take away from that phrase is he doesn't imagine us living an unburdened life, but it's a light burden. And so somehow we find a way in the midst of the situation that's challenging us to lighten it.
Yeah.
Right? Whether that's bringing some levity into it, some humor, it's done through community, but it is something that just adds that element of grace to it.
Yeah. I like that image of Jesus sharing the load of, he's not going to take it from you, but he'll give you a helping hand so it doesn't feel so heavy.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. It's I think that this is such a important theme that runs right through all the vastness of the Bible, right? The sense that there's the strength of God to accompany us and all people through all of these circumstances in life. And that makes a world of difference to people in the midst of you know, facing a future that may seem to be in which we're going to be overly burdened. And I would have to say that some of the most balanced, centered, gracious people I've met are people whom you would think, wow, their situation seems to be just so burdened in so many ways.
Right.
And yet they have managed to find ease, a graciousness, a peace through all of that.
Yeah.
And so that hope is there for everyone, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was easy.
Yeah. If only it were so, right?
If only it were so. Well, it's just like there's so much change that's happening. It's kind of this like, are we here? Are we there? Are we here? Are we there? What's happening?
Yep.
And so it's funny trying to find our way through it in a way that still you can kind of keep a sense of yourself and responding to things in a loving, kind way. I feel like I've been seeing in various sports news and other places some less than stellar behavior from people. And that just makes me sad.
Yeah. It's like how to make life harder, right?
Right?
How to make life seem like it's less easy, right?
Yeah.
More complicated.
Let's be kind to each other, guys.
I am so also thinking about this theme. I'm really glad you asked this question because it's on my mind. I'm like ticking along about it, right?
Yeah.
But so one of the challenges that faith communities face at this time is this part of us may feel like, oh, this is a time when we really have to draw in, not extend ourselves, not overextend ourselves into the world. We got to be very cautious. We have to be extra prudent about everything. However, the same person who says, come unto me, right? And when you're weary and I will give you rest, also says, greater things than I have done shall you do.
Yeah.
So I think being in a community of faith is about living in this very creative conversation between, I'm going to give you an opportunity to change the world, right? And bring love and light into the world. On the other hand, I'm also going to give you rest.
Right.
So it's this, they seem like polar opposites, but they need each other. They're not really opposites.
Yeah.
And I think that the ease comes from having the confidence that we're part of a community that's doing something that matters in the world.
Yeah.
And that will, at times, pull us out of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
And which sounds kind of counterintuitive, right? To getting a sense of ease and rest.
Yeah.
But I think there's a sense of satisfaction that comes when you know that you're being challenged, but you're on the right path.
Sure.
Right? You're doing more than you think you're capable of doing, but you're doing it with other people. And you know that it can make a difference to future generations, even if we won't see the result.
Absolutely.
Right? That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So again, it's that great image you use of the yoga pose that may seem so difficult, but you can breathe through it. Right? You can find a way. We can find a way to ease our way through all of those changes.
Right.
And maybe that's the key, to ease our way through them.
Right.
Like rather than barge through them.
Yeah. Right.
We're good at that.
Yeah. force it.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
How many times did you say, like, don't force it? I'm like, but that's what I heard.
Right.
What do you mean I can't micromanage it?
Yeah, exactly.
How dare you? It's funny on a micro level, if you will. That puts me in mind of the challenge that and wonderful challenge that creating this space has been, and what just true joy that has brought me in my work. I will just say,
yeah, and us, thanks to you.
I mean, doing it together, right? And
Yeah.
just like the idea of things can be difficult and challenging, but we had this project. I love a project, but
Yes, you do.
having a positive project where I knew that the things we were doing and the research, I mean, ask my husband, I was spending every day watching and researching YouTube videos on best practices and gear and tech, and I was having so much fun.
Yeah.
But the idea that it would create a positive change,
Yep.
that it would not only change our workflow, but it would change the experience for our listeners and for our community. It felt so good.
Which it has done.
It's amazing.
It's brought that change.
Well, thanks to our community for the support of it, for sure. Like that wouldn't have been possible without that vision from our team. But it was such a bright, and it continues to be such a bright spot in a challenging world, and really talking about making the best of a difficult situation, because
Yeah.
we had talked about this space, or the idea of this space, I think for years now. We talked about having like a set aside space to record and have conversation that would be a little easier than we were talking about. So we just turned the heat on in the building, and we were reminiscing about trying to record in Ed's office.
Oh, what a space. Sound central.
Oh my gosh, because there's like this whine, this really high pitched squeal from the heat. And we're grateful to have heat, but could do without the sound of it. And then there's like an awkward window.
It wasn't
journey,
an
folks.
easy space.
It was not. We did not have ease there. We
No.
tried our best. We learned lots of things.
Well, just listening to you and how much satisfaction all this has brought you, especially like
satisfying.
getting out of that space and into a much better one.
Yep.
But the great thing about that is that you found, this was something that was calling to you, right?
Totally.
It was.
Yeah.
And so then even though there may have been like tough moments along the way, or having to figure things out, do things for the first time, you've got this like inner river of energy flowing.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's what makes the difference. I think sometimes in life, it is a light burden because it's fun.
Right.
Right. And there's work to do with it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to really we have to think more carefully about how to help that burden become lighter, because it's not something we want to take on,
Yeah.
but it has to be done.
Right.
Right. So that's constantly reframing that experience to make it feel like it can be a source of satisfaction.
Right. Yeah. And reframing how we think about it can change so much. It puts me in mind of that. I think we've talked about this before, how we can, change the chatter or change the channel in our mind.
Yes. Yeah.
Of that, we are in control of our thoughts, whether we feel like we are or not.
Yeah.
And that there's so much power in reframing how you see something.
There is. And it often stems from how we talk to ourselves and,
Right.
and how we listen to ourselves. And I will say this past couple of years, because of the pandemic, I've spent more time being conscious of how I send messages to myself. And I've gotten much better. Like as soon as something starts down a road that I'll just say, stop,
Good for you.
Stop right there.
Yeah.
You did that a couple of times today already. We don't need to go back down that road a third time.
Right.
And actually, the mind listens to itself over time.
My mind's more like a toddler. I have to distract it with something shiny.
Shiny object syndrome for the
Yeah,
mind.
basically. I gotta,
That's good too.
I'm growing. I'm getting there. I'm not quite to that level of like mastery. I'm like, oh, let's distract myself.
It's good to have something to look forward to.
I'll get there eventually. It puts me in mind of, there was a fabulous, it wasn't an official TED Talk, but it was a lecture that John Cleese gave. John Cleese of Monty Python fame, that he gave about the power of humor in difficult situations.
Oh, I love that.
And how, that it can, I think, create an ease. It can create a better creative experience between people. If you're wrestling through something, having a levity, and not to an inappropriate level, but I would commend that video to anybody. I'll link it in the video description below.
Oh, thank you.
It's worth watching. It's fabulous.
Yeah. We do have, whether it's God-given or who knows how this develops over the years, but we do have a tremendous capacity to see the lighthearted side of things if we just give ourselves a chance to do so.
Yeah.
And I think every once in a while there was a famous expedition to the Antarctic and right before the First World War broke out. Sir Ernest Shackleton led this from the United Kingdom. And the poor expedition, there were 29 men. They got stuck on the ice. They got stuck in the ice. They lost their ship.
Oh, geez.
They had to use their lifeboats. They eventually did survive, but it was a horrific journey. But what did they do? They set up a soccer tournament at one point. They had skits, which the men developed on the ship, right? So they had these little drama contests, right? And they figured out how they could turn everything into a game. Because, of course, the one thing they didn't want to think about was they might not ever get out of this situation.
Right.
And they were there for month after month after month. Oh, my gosh. And they all survived. And a large part of it was, and they had some really difficult people in the crew who got more difficult as things got worse.
Shocking.
There you are. Human nature being what it is.
Right.
And but they found a way through it in large part because of humor.
I love that.
Yeah. They didn't lose that managed to tap it.
Well, and to tie it into what we were talking about yesterday, that I think there's an element of humility in all of that, because it's not taking yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
And being like,
good point.
We'll get, it's, that there's an element of that kind of everybody has a struggle, and you're, that we're all dealing with something, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. If we can just kind of step back away from the control panel of the universe, right? Leave a little room there.
Yeah.
It's amazing what happens. That's when we give some, room for grace and the unexpected.
Absolutely.
The good unexpected things.
The good unexpected things, yeah. I like you qualified that.
Yes.
Well, do you have any closing thoughts for us today, Ed?
Well, I loved your connection with humility, because that, it comes from an ancient word which really means to be grounded. And I think that when we're humble and we know that we can reach out and be vulnerable, then a kind of an ease can be created from that. And thank you for opening this conversation with us today.
Well, thanks for the help. I feel encouraged for an easeful week ahead.
Amen.
And finding my way through. Thank you all so much for joining us today at Round Hill Radio. Round Hill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church.